Not everyone wants to be an early riser, but I always did. Most of the people I wanted to emulate with my life were waking early in the morning, making the most of their day. It was something I desired to be true of me, but was never able to accomplish, until my mid-30s actually. Roughly a decade ago, I decided to change my habits. Oh, I don't wake up at 4 a.m. like some stories I hear, but most mornings nowadays, I wake up at 6 a.m. cheerfully and excited to get started with the day. And everything changed in just 1 month's time. If you've ever wanted to become an early riser, here are the exact steps I took. Number 1, I set a 30-day experiment. I learned the value of 30-day experiments from Steve Pavlina. He talks about the 30-day experiment and how it makes habit change seem more possible. He puts it this way: we often psych ourselves out of getting started by mentally thinking about the change as something permanent before we've even begun. But what if you thought about making the change only temporary, say for 30 days, and then you're free to go back to your old habits? This doesn't seem so hard anymore. He continues, 30 days is a long enough period to see if you like the changes in your life. And after 30 days, if you like the change, it's easier to mark the behavior as already a habit. Now, you can try the 30-day experiment for any life change that you're interested in, but for me, it became the month-long experiment that turned me into an early riser for good. I chose a 30-day period and committed to waking up every morning at 5 a.m. It's just for 30 days. Surely I can accomplish that, I would tell myself, and so can you. Number 2, feet on the ground, look out the window. Every morning when my alarm went off, I gave myself only 2 instructions: feet on the ground, eyes out the window. Feet on the ground as in stand up, and eyes out the window as in literally look outside. Feet on the ground, eyes out the window. These were the only 2 disciplined steps that I required of myself every morning. Not burdensome, not difficult, just 2 small actions. In my head, as a matter of fact, I just repeat the phrase, feet on the ground, eyes out the window. Those steps became incredibly effective, especially on the days that I struggled to get up. They weren't difficult, but once you complete those 2 steps, you've won 80% of the battle. At that point, it requires a conscious decision to go lay back down and fall asleep. Plus, depending on when you choose to wake, if there's sunshine outside, the sunlight boosts your mood and literally, biologically helps you stay awake. But even if there is no sunlight, feet on the ground, eyes out the window. After completing those 2 simple steps, motivated by my desire to be successful in my experiment, I was up, awake, and out of bed. Number 3, go to bed when you're tired. Waking up early will mean that you get less sleep if you keep the same bedtime. So the most important change to become an early riser is to learn going to bed earlier. But what time should that be? You let your body tell you. Change your thinking from I go to bed at blank p.m. and change it to I go to bed when I feel tired, and let your body tell you when that is. It takes a little getting used to, especially if you're used to wasting hours at the end of the day watching television or scrolling social media, but you remind yourself that you're only trying this out for 30 days. And I can almost guarantee that after a few weeks of learning to listen to your body and going to bed when it asks you to, you'll love the new approach, rather than simply letting the clock tell you how late you should stay up. Number 4, find a motivation for the morning. Waking up early is easier when you have a purpose to it. In most cases, your home will be quiet when you begin waking up early, so use the time intentionally. During my 30-day experiment, I was working to minimize the sentimental items that had collected in our basement. It was a project I wanted to complete, but I knew it would take time. I also had 2 young children, and I didn't want to sacrifice time away from them in the evening after work. So decluttering the basement became part of my morning routine. I'd wake up at 5, declutter a box or shelf in the basement for an hour, then I'd make breakfast, get ready for work, and be fully ready by the time my kids were up getting ready for school. I would also use occasional mornings to write when appropriate, growing Becoming Minimalist.com at the time, but I always knew what I wanted to do when I woke up. Maybe you'd enjoy extra time reading, praying, painting, exercising, journaling, baking, meditating, or doing yoga. The choice is yours. Don't pick an activity that you dread, but pick something that will help you stick to your experiment and wake up time. Number 5, awake is awake. There's a difference between awake and cheerful, and some mornings that was helpful to remember. There were certainly some days when I felt alive and excited to be up, but there were other mornings where I was simply dragging myself out of bed. I was the only one awake in my home, so my sloggy mood didn't affect anybody else. I'd often have to remind myself that my goal for the 30-day experiment wasn't necessarily to be a fully joyful Joshua at 5 a.m. My goal was simply to be awake. And over time, as I appreciated more and more those early hours in the day, joyfulness came more naturally. And number 6, after 30 days, adjust. After 30 days, make a decision on how you want to continue. You can keep your designated wake-up time, or you can adjust to a new one, or you can throw out the entire idea. If you've enjoyed the mornings, believe you're living more intentionally, and don't feel like you're missing too much late at night, almost certainly you will have begun reshaping your sleeping habits. You can keep your designated wake-up time, 5 a.m. for example, or you can adjust to a new one. After my 30-day experiment, I had completed most of the work in the basement, but I still really enjoyed the writing that I was doing in the early mornings. So I kept my 5 a.m. wake up for Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'd wake up at 6, which is when I wake up most days still today. John Dryden is quoted as saying, "We first make our habits, then our habits make us." Becoming an early riser was a habit I always wanted to make for myself. And through these steps, I accomplished it. You can too.